The recent events surrounding Damar Hamlin's injury and recovery got me thinking about how it's related to the life of faith, and it's lifted up some questions I'd like to discuss today. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. Pastor Tim Westermeyer here from St. Philip Deacon in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. Good to be with you as always. So, certain weeks in this podcast, I have something I want to share with you. Maybe it's a historic event. Maybe it's about an author. Maybe it's about a moment in the church year. Maybe it's a truth theologically, something like that. Today, I'm actually sitting with a couple of questions, and I'm interested in your response to them. And as it happens, they involve the recent events with the Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, and by a strange stroke of providence, I was chatting with our editor and cameraman Tim before we started taping this about something unrelated. He didn't know what I was going to talk about today, and that episode with Hamlin came up. If you are not familiar with it, on January 2nd, Monday Night Football, Hamlin, who's a safety for the Buffalo Bills, was playing in a Monday Night Football game against the Bengals, and he got hit and ended up having a cardiac arrest. And the very good news is that the week we're taping this, he finally now has gone home. I think he just went home within the last 24 hours or so. And prayers continue for his speedy and full recovery. And the prayers is sort of where my questions lead. And so I guess I'll categorize my questions into two different groups. One for people of faith, and one for maybe people who claim they don't have any faith. I'm guessing not many of them watch this, but whatever, I've still got the question for them. And so for the first category, for people of faith, I guess my question is, and I'll start by saying my premise, my assumption after now 20 years of being a pastor, is that as Christians in the culture that we live in, we tend to be a little reluctant or reticent or defensive about talking about our faith or sharing our faith. We kind of keep it to ourselves. And yet, in a moment like what we witnessed again on January 2nd in that football game, when there's a catastrophic life or death kind of event, my sense is that as Christians, we are much more willing to go to a place of faith, and in this case, for example, talk about, well, we need to pray for Damar. And lots of the commentators, I don't know if you saw the coverage, but lots of the commentators, the journalists who were on air, were, it seemed to me anyway, very willing to say we all need to pray for Damar and for his recovery. So the question I have for us as people of faith, I guess, that I've been reflecting on and sitting with, and which I would like your response to, is if we're only willing to share our faith or be open about our faith at a moment of crisis or catastrophe, what does that mean for the rest of our lives when it's not a moment of catastrophe and we're sort of hiding our faith? Does that mean we're not being honest or authentic or entirely truthful with other people about what we actually believe? And if so, is that a good thing? I have my own reflections or thoughts about that, I guess. But I really would be interested in how do you think about that? Or do you think about it? Or am I missing the mark here? If you're willing, please share your thoughts about that below, or as always, email me. So that's for people of faith. For people who claim not to have faith, my assumption, and again, maybe I'm wrong about this, is that in a moment like that, again, a catastrophic life or death moment, I have a feeling that people who claim to not have any faith also go sort of naturally and instinctively to a place of, I'm going to call it a place of prayer. And again, if that's the case, and if you're one of these people who happen to be seeing this, I would love to have your thoughts about this. If you go to a place of prayer in a moment like that, again, the question for me is, what does that say about what you actually in your heart believe, despite what you claim to believe during times when things are normal or there isn't a catastrophe or a tragedy. And I think both those categories remind us, I think they do remind us of the truth of God's presence in our life, the truth of how we are wired to be in relation to God, and how we're wired in those moments to invite God's presence in our lives even more fully. And so maybe part of what I'm saying is maybe it'd be a good thing if we lived that way, even if it's not a moment of crisis or catastrophe. And we recognize partially, I think part of what I'm saying too is in those moments we realize I'm not in control. God is. And maybe it would be a good idea and a healthy approach to life to recognize that we're never really in control, and that that's okay, and that we can leave all of life and all of its vicissitudes, all of its challenges, all of its joys, all of its hopes in the hands of a God who we claim as Christians says, I love you, I'm with you, trust me, right? So again, I would love your thoughts. I've been sitting with this ever since the event happened on the 2nd, and I knew I wanted to talk about it. I wasn't quite sure how to do that, so I hope that raising those questions makes sense. And by the way, as always, we haven't done a Q&A in a while, but if there are other things you'd like us to talk about in this space, I'd love to have those questions from you as well. So that's it for today. As always, be well, stay in touch, and God bless.